The unlikely hero, Ibrahim Trare's path to global peace. On the 27th of July 2025, in the heart of Scandinavia, the world's most prestigious peace committee revealed its shortlist of candidates for the Nobel Peace Prize. Among the names was one that stunned the world: Ibrahim Trare, the interim president of Burkina Faso. In the eyes of many, Traore was an improbable contender. Not a career politician, not a figure who had risen through the corridors of elite institutions, but a man whose journey to power was shaped by extraordinary conviction. His rise to prominence was not through a democratic election, but through the will of a people who yearned for change. And now, as the world looked on, this 36-year-old soldier stood on the brink of a historic moment: the possibility of becoming the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize laureate. This nomination was not about controversy, it was about clarity. In a world where diplomacy often feels like a performance, Trare's message was simple and profound: the real work of peace comes not from boardrooms and speeches, but from the sweat of the people, the sacrifice of the workers, and the relentless pursuit of truth. He chose a path of labor, sacrifice, and justice, a revolution that wasn't fought with weapons, but with education, economic sovereignty, and human dignity. But what made Trare's story truly extraordinary was his journey from a soldier in one of the world's poorest nations to the symbol of global peace. How did a young military leader from Burkina Faso become the personification of hope and change, not just in his country, but across Africa and the world? For the first time in history, a leader under 40, who came to power through a military coup, was being considered a serious candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. The committee's decision was groundbreaking. They praised Traore as a rare leader in today's world, not someone driven by personal ambition or hatred, but a man who took up arms to protect the conscience of his people. The peace Traore fostered in Burkina Faso wasn't born from international treaties or backroom negotiations. It emerged from the deep collective will of a nation struggling to rise from poverty and violence, seeking dignity and self-reliance. In this new definition of peace, there were no grand speeches or diplomatic handshakes. Instead, peace was cultivated in the fields, in schools, in the hearts of communities coming together to rebuild their fractured country. The rise of Ibrahim Trare. When Ibrahim Trare seized power in Burkina Faso in September 2022, few could have predicted the sweeping changes that would follow. What started as a military coup soon became a transformative journey, one that would redefine the very essence of governance in a region long marred by instability and poverty. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso was not only able to weather the storms of its troubled past, but also rise as a beacon of hope, providing a unique model for self-reliance, peace, and empowerment. From the moment Traore took office, his vision was clear: peace through self-reliance. His approach was radical in its simplicity but deeply grounded in the practical realities of life in Burkina Faso. He understood that the people of his country were weary of empty promises and foreign aid. They were looking for solutions that would empower them to stand on their own 2 feet, solutions that did not rely on foreign intervention or handouts but on the resilience of the Burkinabe people themselves. In an age where international organizations often imposed top-down solutions, Traore sought to rebuild his country from the ground up, starting with the people. One of his most significant accomplishments, and arguably one of the most transformative moments in Burkina Faso's recent history, was the reconciliation of over 12,000 armed militants. For decades, Burkina Faso had been plagued by violent insurgencies, fueled by regional conflicts, and exacerbated by global powers' disregard for the country's sovereignty. But Traore chose a path of healing instead of destruction. Rather than responding to violence with more violence, he initiated a groundbreaking program of community reconciliation, vocational training, and resettlement. His approach was rooted in the understanding that, while conflict may create division, it is only through unity and shared purpose that true peace can be achieved. His model was radically different from the militarized responses typical of post-coup governments. Traore's goal wasn't simply to disarm and imprison former fighters, but to reintegrate them into society as productive citizens. The process was a painstaking one, with community leaders, former militants, and government officials working together to establish trust. This approach laid the groundwork for a new kind of peace, one that was not about retribution or vengeance, but about mutual respect and understanding. Former fighters found new purpose in life through vocational training programs and were reintegrated into society with dignity. In another bold move to restore Burkina Faso's sovereignty, Traore turned his attention to the country's economic backbone, its agricultural sector. For years, foreign corporations had seized control of vast swathes of the country's farmland, exploiting local labor while reaping the benefits for themselves. Traoré, however, was determined to change this narrative. In a historic move, he returned 3.8 million hectares of land to local farmers, effectively reclaiming it from foreign investors. This wasn't just an economic decision, it was a symbolic gesture, one that sent a loud and clear message. The land belongs to the people who work it, not to faceless multinational corporations. This bold land reform was a direct challenge to the colonial legacy that had long kept African nations shackled to foreign interests. Traoré's decision marked a decisive break from the past and created a new paradigm for economic justice in Burkina Faso. By empowering local farmers and ensuring that they retained the fruits of their labor, he gave people not just a chance to survive, but a chance to thrive. The reform also demonstrated that it was possible to challenge global economic systems and still create a better future for the people. The land, once in the hands of a few powerful outsiders, was now being worked by those who truly needed it, helping to revitalize the economy and restore dignity to those who had been left behind for so long. But Traoré's vision extended beyond the land. Faced with the environmental challenges that plagued the Sahel region, he launched one of his most ambitious initiatives, the Sahel Life Alliance. This coalition, involving Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, was focused on one of the most pressing issues facing the region: desertification. The Sahel is one of the most ecologically fragile areas in the world, and over the years, the vast, arid lands had been slowly encroaching on the already scarce arable land. However, under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso joined forces with its neighbors to plant over 800 million trees, creating a green belt to halt the spread of the desert and mitigate the effects of climate change. The Ecological Restoration Project not only demonstrated regional cooperation but also set an example for the world. In an era when climate change seems insurmountable, this collective effort proved that even in the face of such dire challenges, there is still hope, and there is still the power to act. This initiative was not just about planting trees. It was about restoring life to the land, ensuring food security for future generations, and reaffirming the deep connection between the people and the environment they depend on. Traoré's economic policies were equally bold. In a time when corruption and bureaucratic waste were endemic in many African governments, Traoré cut through the red tape. By slashing government spending by a staggering 60%, he freed up resources that were redirected into the sectors that mattered most: education and healthcare. In just 18 months, Burkina Faso saw the construction of 2,400 new schools and 700 healthcare centers, an unparalleled achievement in a region often plagued by slow development and corruption. The education reforms, in particular, had a profound impact. Traoré recognized that the key to a brighter future lay in the hands of the country's youth. His government worked tirelessly to expand access to education, even in the most rural and remote areas. But it wasn't just about building new schools. It was about ensuring that the children who attended those schools were healthy, nourished, and ready to learn. Recognizing the connection between nutrition and educational performance, Traoré implemented a program where 95% of rural primary school children received free lunches made from locally produced food. By investing in both education and nutrition, Traoré helped create a virtuous cycle that strengthened both agriculture and learning. It was an approach that reinforced the idea that true progress isn't achieved in isolation but through interconnected, holistic reforms. Finally, in May 2025, Traoré reached another groundbreaking milestone. He pardoned 1,100 former militants, welcoming them into the newly established Farmers of Peace program. This initiative was hailed by the United Nations as a global model, demonstrating how a grassroots approach to peace can not only end cycles of violence but also foster lasting prosperity. The program took the same principles of reconciliation and reintegration and applied them to the agricultural sector, where former fighters were given the tools, training, and resources they needed to become successful farmers. The model wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about giving people a future rooted in peace, dignity, and work. These unprecedented reforms, driven by Traoré's vision of peace through self-reliance, laid the foundation for a brighter future for Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel region. They were a testament to what can be achieved when a leader prioritizes the needs of their people above all else, and when that leadership is grounded in both practical action and moral clarity. A global shift. What happened next was unexpected. On July 1, 2025, the Vatican became an unlikely stage for a remarkable endorsement. Pope Leo XIV, renowned for his unwavering commitment to social justice and advocacy for the marginalized, took a rare and symbolic step in publicly acknowledging Ibrahim Trare's transformative leadership. At a time when global politics often feels dominated by cynicism and inaction, the Pope's words cut through the noise, carrying the weight of centuries of spiritual authority. In his speech, the Pope made a profound statement. "When I pray for peace, the face of a young soldier from Burkina Faso appears in my mind. He does not preach through laws or scriptures, but through sweat and soil. He has never set foot inside the churches of Rome. Yet, he acts as if the world's poor are his sanctuary." This was no ordinary endorsement. It was the first time in history that the Vatican had officially nominated a sitting African leader for the Nobel Peace Prize. And for a pope to praise a leader who rose to power through a military coup, one who defied conventional political pathways, was nothing short of revolutionary. The Holy See's decision to support Traore was groundbreaking, as it shifted the narrative from abstract diplomacy, often mired in bureaucracy and rhetoric, to real, tangible action, the kind of leadership that is rooted in the day-to-day struggles of ordinary people. The Vatican's endorsement sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles around the world. Leaders from different corners of the globe, some previously divided by ideological and political lines, found themselves reluctantly united in their respect for Ibrahim Trare's unconventional but undeniably effective leadership. What began as an isolated recognition from the Vatican quickly snowballed into a global conversation about what it means to lead with integrity, humility, and purpose. French President Anne-Luc Moreau, representing the former colonial power, took a measured stance. She acknowledged the impressive results of Traoré's reforms, noting, "We may not agree with many of Mr. Traoré's methods, but we cannot ignore the results. He is writing a new chapter in Africa's story with action, not aid." Her comments reflected both admiration for his achievements and an acknowledgement of the complexities of his leadership. Moreau's diplomatic tact revealed an underlying respect, even as she voiced skepticism about the methods Traore used to arrive at his success. Across the Atlantic in Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Janet R. Collins offered a similarly cautious but respectful response. "We respect the nomination and acknowledge Mr. Traoré's efforts toward regional stability in the Sahel. This is an opportunity for the international community to rethink what 21st century peace truly means," Collins said. The statement reflected the shifting dynamics of global diplomacy, as Traoré's policies forced the West to reconsider traditional assumptions about democracy, peace, and governance. Behind the polished rhetoric, however, there was an unspoken recognition that his approach, rejecting international loans and Western economic models, was an ideological challenge to the existing global economic order. For all the caution in their words, Washington's acknowledgement of Traore was a clear signal that his influence was growing on the global stage. In Brazil, President Luiz G. Costa, a longtime admirer of anti-colonial leaders and their legacies, offered a more direct endorsement of Traore. Costa, known for her vocal stance on decolonization, compared Traore to one of Africa's greatest revolutionaries, Thomas Sankara. "I called him the new Sankara, but he corrected me. He said, 'I'm just a farmer in uniform.' That's when I knew he deserved the Nobel," Costa said. Her words struck a chord across the global South, where leaders saw in Traoré's humility and commitment to self-reliance a reflection of their own struggles for independence and economic sovereignty. The comparison to Sankara was telling, as it linked Traoré's grassroots approach to liberation with the enduring legacies of anti-colonial movements across Africa and Latin America. It resonated particularly in countries where people had long sought leaders who acted in the interests of the poor and downtrodden, rather than in service of foreign interests. The connection between Africa's struggles and Latin America's history of resistance became a key point of solidarity for Traoré's supporters. In the heart of the global South, his story was more than just a political success. It was seen as part of a larger movement that was redefining leadership. Traoré wasn't a typical politician, nor was he a product of Western educational institutions. He was a farmer, a soldier, and a leader whose authenticity and actions inspired millions. For many, Traoré's rise symbolized the shift away from colonial legacies and foreign domination toward a future where Africa and the global South could chart their own paths. This ideological shift was echoed across multiple continents, and Traoré's influence began to ripple through the political discourse of countries far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. From rural villages in the Sahel to urban centers in South America, people began to see him not just as a political leader but as a figure of moral and social change. The Vatican's endorsement of Ibrahim Trare sparked a global reevaluation of how we measure peace, justice, and leadership in the 21st century. The symbolism of a pope endorsing a leader who was not a product of traditional political systems was undeniable. It was as if the world was being asked to look at leadership through a new lens, one that focused on practical, ground-level change rather than abstract ideologies. Ibrahim Trare's journey from soldier to statesman was more than a personal victory. It became a rallying cry for the marginalized and disenfranchised around the world, signaling that the paths to leadership and to peace could take many forms. A continent reborn. The nomination of Ibrahim Trare for the Nobel Peace Prize didn't just alter the trajectory of his own life. It ignited a fire that spread across the entire African continent. It sparked a global conversation about Africa's place in the world, forcing the international community to rethink what it means to lead, to govern, and to make peace. In Burkina Faso, the immediate reaction was electrifying. In the streets of Ouagadougou, the capital city, celebrations erupted with a fervor previously unseen in the country's recent history. Thousands of people flooded the city's squares, chanting Trare's name and waving the national flag with pride. It wasn't just a victory for Traore, it was a victory for the collective spirit of the Burkinabe people. There was an overwhelming sense that the entire country had been reborn, not simply through a military leader's rise to power, but through the realization that peace, stability, and dignity could be restored. For many, it felt as though the nation had broken free from the shackles of poverty and foreign dependence. It was no longer just a country struggling for survival. It had found its voice on the global stage. The belief that peace could be cultivated from the very soil beneath their feet gave the people of Burkina Faso a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The impact of Trare's nomination rippled far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Across Africa, the message was unequivocal. If one of the poorest nations in the world could reclaim its dignity through hard work, resilience, and self-reliance, then so could others. Trare's story became a symbol for the continent's potential. It wasn't just about political reform or military strategy. It was about redefining what leadership means in the modern world and challenging the global systems that often kept Africa in a state of dependency. In countries like Mali, Niger, and Guinea, youth movements took to the streets to celebrate Trare's nomination. Young people across the region projected videos of his transformative work onto public walls and social media platforms, rallying behind his message of unity, self-sufficiency, and peace. These movements weren't just political in nature, they were cultural as well. Students, artists, and activists organized forums, art exhibitions, and film screenings that explored the depth of Trare's legacy and what his nomination meant for the future of Africa. It was a continent-wide celebration of the values of justice, hard work, and the rejection of foreign dominance. Social media buzzed with the hashtag Nobel for Africa, and it quickly became a rallying cry not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire continent. The hashtag transcended borders, resonating with Africans from every corner of the globe, from Cape Town to Cairo, from Dakar to Addis Ababa. It was a symbol of unity, a collective recognition that Africa's future lies in its ability to govern itself, to make its own decisions, and to set its own course. For many, this moment represented a profound shift in how Africa viewed itself on the global stage. No longer did it need to rely on the goodwill or charity of foreign powers. Africa was no longer speaking with borrowed voices. It was speaking for itself, and the world was finally listening. The nomination of Ibrahim Trare as a contender for the Nobel Peace Prize became more than just an individual recognition. It became a statement that Africa, with all its complexities, struggles, and hopes, was now a force to be reckoned with. This was not just about a single leader. This was about an entire continent reclaiming its dignity, its voice, and its power. And in every corner of Africa, from the bustling cities to the rural villages, people felt the ripple effect of this new sense of pride. It was no longer a question of waiting for aid or assistance from the West. The message was clear: Africa could take care of itself. Africa had the potential to lead the world in new, innovative ways, grounded in its own values and traditions. As the Nobel Peace Prize nomination process continued, the wave of support for Traore only grew. The world watched as this African leader, who rose to power through a military coup yet embodied the principles of peace and self-reliance, continued to challenge the status quo. And in doing so, he inspired a new generation of African leaders who would shape the future of the continent in their own image. Bold, independent, and unapologetically African. The final countdown. As the world prepares for the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize winner in December 2025, all eyes are on Ibrahim Trare. Whether he wins or not, his story has already shifted the global conversation. He is a leader whose methods defy easy categorization. His is a vision of peace rooted in hard work, self-reliance, and dignity. The 10th of December will not just be about one man receiving a prestigious award. It will be about redefining what peace means in the 21st century. And if Ibrahim Trare's journey has shown us anything, it's that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, dignity, and land in the hands of those who till it.